Okay, now we have our background. We can click on this lock button, which will allow us to lock this background and we will not able to move it. The only way to change now our background is to click on this lock button to unlock it, and now we can move it around or select it and change the color. But this lock feature is really handy in case if you will animate some other shapes and don't want to be able to select the background. So I'm gonna lock it. And it's a good idea to save your project from time to time. So let's do exactly that. We can go to File, Save as, I'm gonna name it my project class, and save wherever you like, and click Save. So from my original example, you can see that we've created this kind of character, which just looks like he's in 3D space, because we clearly can see where exactly this ball is looking at. So let's try to create this ball with this animation. So first of all, to start easy, we will create just a simple circle. To create a circle, we can click here and hold and select this ellipse tool. And about from the center, you can left mouse click and drag to the right like this to create a circle. To create a circle from the center where you clicked, you just need to press Ctrl and hold, or Command if you're on a Mac. And to have a perfect circle shape, you want to hold Shift as well. So as you can see, now I'm holding Ctrl and Shift, and this allows me to create a perfect circle from the center. And while you're holding it, you can just drag it and make it larger or smaller, just by dragging to the right or to the left. Just pick a size which you like. I like this kind of size. It doesn't really matter because we can change it later on. So let's see how we can change and adjust this circle. First of all, we can select this shape layer and go to Align here to this panel. And if you cannot see this Align panel, you can go to Window and enable it from here, Align. It will allow us to set it to the middle. So with this Align horizontally, we will align horizontally and align vertically. And we can also change this anchor point. By the way, this anchor point is the point from where our animation is. So for example, if I would change the scale, it will animate from this anchor point. Or if I'm gonna change the rotation, it also rotates from this anchor point. So to set this anchor point to the center, you can just select this shape layer and press Ctrl Alt Home. And as you can see, it set it exactly to the center. Now we can change the colors of this circle. So to change colors, as you remember, we want to go to the fill. So let's click here and set it to simple white color. Just drag it down and change to the white color and click OK. In our case, we don't want to use a gradient, so we can just click here on Fill word and change to the solid color. So it would be much simpler. And let's change to white color once again. Let's call it this shape layer circle. So to rename it, we want to press Enter on keyboard and call it circle. And now we can stylize it a bit more. So it's time to create another shape inside of this shape layer. As you remember from first video, I've said that we can have multiple shapes in one shape layer. So to create another shape, for example, we would want to have this kind of rim and also this kind of glow. We would want to create another circle and another bigger one. So for this, you can use Ellipse tool and create another one. But it's a bit hard to create a perfect one and then adjust the position so it would match to the first one. So this is why we are not going to do this in this way. We are going to delete this ellipse tool, which I've just created. And we can just select this ellipse one and duplicate it. It's much easier. So let's select this ellipse tool and press Ctrl D to duplicate, or go to Edit, Duplicate. So now with this second ellipse tool, we can scroll down here and disable the fill, and we can just change the transform of this ellipse. So let's go to the transform options and change this scale. Let's make it a bit bigger, like this. And now we can just switch off the fill option and enable the stroke option. And if we will open this stroke, we can change the stroke width. which will allow us to change the width of this circle. Something like 6 or 7 looks fine to me. And we can now close this stroke one as well as transform option. Also, we can close this ellipse 2, which we can also rename it just by pressing enter. And we can just rename it to ring. This we can name it as core. And now we can duplicate core one more time. Just select core and press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Set it above and let's open core and maybe let's rename it. Just press enter on keyboard and let's name it glow. And here in transform, we can change the scale to make it even bigger. And as you can see in transform, we have a bunch of options. We can even change the position of it if we would want, rotation, opacity, and more. In our case, we want to change the opacity, so it would look like simple glow. I'll set mine to 15 for now, and let's close it, our glow. And now, as you can see, we have all of these shapes inside of one circle, which is really handy because we are going to animate this circle around like this, and we will not have to animate each of these shapes one by one. And in case if we would want to animate these circles one by one, we would create another shape on different shape layers. But that would be a more advanced technique which we will cover later in this class. And now I just want to change this color overall. If I'm gonna select this circle and we'll try to change the fill color to any other color, it will change only the color of some of these parts of these shapes, which is not what we want. We can press Ctrl Z to undo this moment, and we can go one by one and change the fill color here like this, then ring color and stroke, because we used stroke, and change to other color, for example, and also glow. We've used fill, so we would go to fill. And by the way, to quickly check what we've used, you can see on this eyeball. So if I'm gonna click on it, we will disable it or enable it. So this is how I can quickly say what we are used and change the color. So this is how you can separately change the color of your shape. In my case, I don't want to use different kind of colors. I want to have one color overall. And there is easier way to do this. You can just go to effects and presets here, wait for this to load up and use effect called fill. Just type it here, fill, and go to generate fill. Or you can go to effect, but make sure that you selected your circle, then go to effect, generate fill. But in future you will memorize all of these effects names and you will be able to type here in effects and presets, just like I did here. Just type the name of the effect which you want to use and then just left mouse click and drag to the shape which you want to use. So for example, a circle. And as you can see, I've applied another fill effect. So let's delete this one and change this one to lighter cyan color and click OK. So now as you can see, we've changed overall color with just one effect, which is much easier than go to each of these shapes and change it manually. So in the next video, we are going to animate this shape, and later we are going to add this kind of 3D character into our shape. And basically it looks where it wants to go, which gives more life to our animation. See you in the next video. Let's start our first animation. We will animate position of this circle. So to see position, we can just select this circle and press P on keyboard. It will open position. Also, if you will not remember the shortcuts, you always can scroll here down and go to transform. Just make sure that you're going not into the contents, but in transform itself. And here we will animate this position property. It will allow us to animate whole shape as one. This is why it's really handy to remember the shortcuts. Then you will be able just to select your shape layer, press P for position, and animate position. And we will create our first keyframe. So to create our first keyframe, we want to click here on this stopwatch. So let's left mouse click on this stopwatch. It will create this diamond shape keyframe. And if we will select this time cursor and scroll to the first second, and then select our circle and just left mouse click and move up like this, you'll see that it drawn this trajectory as well as created a new keyframe. So what is keyframe? Keyframe is a point in time which remembers value of certain property. In our case, this keyframe remembered this point in time, which is first second. It remembers this value which we've set to this position property. And here at the 0 second, you can see that it remembered in this moment in time this value of position property. And now just between these keyframes with different values, it goes from this value, which is 540, to this value, which is 238. But as you remember, we didn't change any values, we just move it vertically. So basically this first value is x-axis and this second value is y-axis. As you remember, we just move it up, so basically only in y-axis. This is why this value changed. So basically if we will change this value, you can see that we are moving it in y-axis. And if we will change this first value, we will move it in x-axis. So let's repeat one more time. We can just select these keyframes and delete it. So now as you can see, we don't have any animation. We will just set our shape into the middle by using this aligned tool. And we can create first keyframe, which will remember this position. Then we will scroll to 1 second and just move it up. If you will hold shift, it will allow us to move only in one axis. And in this way we've created new keyframe. And now basically our software Adobe After Effects is trying to connect these two values. It remembers that it stays here, and in this point in time it knows that it needs to be here. If we will scroll here to the 3rd second, we can move it to the right. And now as you can see, After Effects knows that it needs to be here at the start. Then at the 1st second it needs to be here, and at 3rd second it needs to be here. This is basically how animation in this software works. And by the way, now you can see that we have a bit of problem. It doesn't really go in the straight lines, because by default After Effects is trying to make this round motion. And if you don't like this kind of motion, you can always select all of the keyframes, right mouse click on it and go to Keyframe Interpolation. And here you can disable this default behavior, which is auto Bezier. You can set to linear. And if we will click OK, you can see that it's set to this linear motion. But keep in mind that this keyframe interpolation is really good only if you want to have these straight lines. But in our case, you remember that we have this kind of straight line and then this circle movement, which as you can see is not a straight line. This is where you don't want to use this keyframe interpolation. This kind of motion is more advanced and we will check in the next video. But for now, let's complete this kind of square kind of motion. So it goes 1 second here, then 1 second here, and at 3rd second we can move it down, and here we can go back to the original point. And if we will press 0 on numpad, we can see our first animation. So before we are going to go to this more complex stuff, I need to explain you a few things which you need to know before going in more complex and advanced kind of stuff. First of all, that you can change the speed between these movements. For example, I want this motion up to go a lot faster, and then this motion to the right a lot slower. So this is how you can do it. You can just select all of these keyframes, which comes after this animation, and move it to the left, which is basically makes this first animation a lot faster, because we only give 12 seconds for it to go. And then this second animation we can make a lot slower by selecting all of these keyframes and moving it to the right. And in this way we are allowing for this animation to go 2 complete seconds. So it would be a lot slower. And you might be wondering why we are selecting all of these keyframes before changing this spacing between keyframes. Basically, by selecting all of the keyframes, we are make sure that we don't change spacing between these keyframes. For example, we like this speed of animation here, so it's a good idea not just to select one of the keyframe and move it to the right, because we will mess up this kind of animation, which will go faster here. So I'm gonna press Ctrl Z. If we want to change only this first part of animation, we always want to select this first keyframe and all of keyframes which comes later, in order to not mess up other animation which we have. For example, this movement down we also will make slow, and this animation to the left we will make fast. So to make it fast, we will squish it the spacing between these two keyframes. And now if we will press 0 on numpad, you'll see that it goes up fast, then goes slower, here also slow, and here fast. So this is basically how you can change the timing of your animation. And if we will space these keyframes evenly, you'll see that this animation goes about at the same speed. Just keep in mind, if you want to have the same speed of animation, you also need to keep in mind which distance it travels. So here is a cool trick. If you want your animation to be exactly the same, you can zoom in into your picture and watch the distance between these small kind of frames. And if you will match this distance like this, as you can see, here is smaller distance and here is bigger distance. So we would need to change this last motion a bit, so it will look kind of the same. In this way, we are making this animation to go the same speed. So what do you want to take out from this class? Basically, now we know that we can move our shapes and change the speed and distance which it travels. And by changing the spacing between these keyframes, we can change the speed with which it travels, which is really cool. And if you still have a trouble with this, you would want to just go to first keyframe, delete all of these keyframes by selecting them and press delete to delete them. Or just by clicking here, it also will delete all of keyframes. And start small. Just create first keyframe, then go a few frames and create this kind of animation. And then play around with this speed. You will see that by pressing 0 on numpad, you have fast movement, and if you will spread out these keyframes more, you will get this slower movement. And once you are comfortable with this motion, you can just delete this keyframe and, for example, go up. And then we can create this square kind of movement. It's really important for you to take time and play around with this principle, so you would be comfortable with the change in the speed and animation. You can rewatch this video to understand it better, or try to animate a different kind of motion, and try in your head to predict what kind of motion you will get as a result. Okay, in the next video we are going to make this animation with our circle goes around like this. See you in the next video.